the superpower for me of dyslexia was the pain that it caused that dragged me to therapy to find out what it was to fall in love with myself. I think my hyperability is to be with any human being on this planet.
Hi, I'm Gil Gershoni, and welcome to Dyslexic Design Thinking. If what they say is true, that an image is worth 1,000 words, then Jock McDonald's latest works are visually expensive. Jock got his start shooting commercial campaigns for Levi's, IKEA, Baby Gap, and Apple before pursuing fine art photography full-time. Today, he combines multiple and sometimes hundreds of images to form a large-scale installation that celebrates our humanity and comments on the world around us. Jock is here today to discuss his life, his career, and of course, his dyslexia.
All right, hey Gil, good to see you. Looking forward to this interview. What's that joke? It's not dyslexics unite, it's dyslexics untie. So I'd like to show you the mobile photo van that we're using for Eye to Eye. Here's the van. We're making magnets to put all over it. But we've been driving all over Sonoma County. We've got our table. American flag proudly flying. We want to get it covered with all these portraits. And we'll refer to it as a womb with a view. So I asked my wife to name the van, and because the project is named Eye to Eyes, she said, why don't you just call it I Van? Ivan.
I like that.
All right, looking forward to this interview, Gil, and
likewise. Welcome.
Let me know how to
So great
proceed.
to see you. Yeah, so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's jump right in, man. When were you diagnosed with dyslexia? How old were you?
I think you diagnosed me when we were at that party.
Well,
that's not true.
I know it's not, but I always knew you were dyslexic. At least I assumed because, you and I work together and, just like the way we think, it's non-linear and always creative and playful and multidimensional. So I figured you probably got the gift, but how old were you?
My report cards from the English prep school that I went to all say the same thing. Jock seems like a bright boy. I have them. Jock needs to pay more attention. Jock needs to be less distracting in class. And my mother, dyslexic was really kind of unknown. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia in 1978 when I was 17 years old. I was in grade 11.
Were you still in Canada or you already moved to the US?
I was still in Canada, and I was still in high school, at the prep, English prep high school. And it was too late. It was like, okay, now we know this. It changes nothing.
You think it's because of the age and you're already kind of finishing, your high school time, and so is it?
Yeah, there's no dyslexic schools.
Back then.
It's sort of like being diagnosed being colorblind, right? You're okay.
Yeah. I know you told me a story about 8th grade English teacher that was really supportive of you. Can you tell me that story?
Oh, I think you're talking about Robert Common.
Is that what
He
it
was
is?
my housemaster. He was my English teacher. He was my rugby coach. Very bright man, very compassionate man. Kind of a seer of young people, because we spent quite a bit of time. He wasn't just my teacher. He ran the house. He was the assistant housemaster in Privet House where I was. And he saw me in a way. He was also kind. It was sort of the first time I remember a teacher being kind, and saying, "You're not dumb." He didn't have a dyslexic prescription or anything, but he was kind, and he would always say, "Well, just do your best," He might have been also the first person that ever said, we don't all think the same way. And
Wise.
he would reward us by reading from the Count of Monte Cristo at the end of English class if we didn't cause a ruckus and he would act it out. And man, he holding the book, acting out the Count of Monte Cristo and the betrayal and the love and I don't know, he made a difference. He ended up, my sister got divorced, and he and my sister are now married.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, what a trip.
I know, what a trip. Here's a funny side story. You don't often get this opportunity. So I got a call from Robert Common. The phone rings. He says, and he has a bit of a Irish Scot accent because that's where he was schooled and grew up. And he says, Jock, I'm calling with a question. I said, well, what is it, Robert? He goes, I'm calling for your sister's hand in marriage. And I just stopped talking and listening, because there's not often you get time for this opportunity to turn the tables on your housemaster, your rugby coach, and he goes, Jock, are you there? I said, I'm here, Robert. Yeah, I'm thinking. And I said, I only have now my sister. My sister's 4 years older than me, so she's knocking on 70. Robert's 12 years older than her. He's probably was well into his 70s or knocking on 70 when this happened. And I said, Robert, I just have one question. He goes, what's that, Jock? I said, are you planning on having children? He goes, oh, Jock, those days are behind us. And so I said, of course you have my blessing. I think you're an amazing human being, and you made a big difference in my life, and you have my blessings.
Beautiful. Do you remember the first picture you took that you were proud of, or that was something about it really stood out for you and it was special?
The first picture that I took that was special? Oh, that's a great question. That's well, an old mentor of mine, a friend of mine, Craig Fraser, used to say, you know, you don't want to work for everybody. You want to work for the best people, do your best work, and then go get better work. This is when I was doing advertising. And he said, when he looked through my portfolio, he's like, why are you trying to do everything? Why are you trying to do food and cars and fashion? And he goes, your portraiture is your best work. And he basically edited down my portfolio for me, and in it had a picture of Robert Arneson, these are all Bay Area artists, and William T. Wiley and a few others. And so I put that portfolio together, and I think the breakthrough came for me in a way when I photographed Robert Mondavi and made a cork jacket for him, which in all honesty was based on David Byrne's grass jacket that he had made. And I was like, because Robert Mondavi's press secretary said, I don't know anyone who spends more time in a tuxedo than Bob Mondavi. And I was like, ding! I just saw the corks, in a herringbone pattern, and so I was sort of mashing up the way I think and prop building, because I apprenticed to a sculptor named Al Farrow when I was young for quite a few years, and he had a bronze foundry, and the physical aspect of creating props was interesting to me, and people really responded. I mean,
I don't know if it's a dyslexic thing. Maybe you feel the same way, but to me, I used to feel like, man, I'm so obsessive about stuff. And people say, oh my God, you're so obsessed about it. And I used to think, and you're so sensitive and you're so obsessed. And it was always told to me as if this is a problem I need to solve. You're so sensitive and you're so obsessed. And what I realized is that my sensitivity is because I sense, I feel, I viscerally feel, I can see the person, and regardless of what they say, I can see, the nuances, the drama, the untold story. I know how to relax them. And then I can also obsess about it because I want every part of it to be in perfection. But what happens when you obsess over something for a long period of time, you become an expert. Nobody tells you this, right? If you want to be an expert, obsess. Obsess about a single thing for a long period of time, and you'll become an expert in it. And I just love the idea that the more we follow what we love, the better we get and the better we find our voice, you know?
I mean, I love what you said about, sensing, sensitive. And often it's laid out as a negative. And it's not, but also the more one thinks about it or obsesses or that, the deeper you go. And the more gets revealed in it. And beautifully put, Gil. And there is that early years of, maybe we're jumping ahead, but how much negativity I took or we took or around it or being judged and I think that's where the toughness comes too, because all that, why are you so sensitive or why can't you get this or why aren't you smarter or all those whys pushed me deeper to think about why are the systems the way they are, meaning the school system, like why is it somebody writing on a blackboard and I have to write it down and I don't do that very well? Why can't I just see how a drill press works by working the drill press? I don't need a diagram of it. That doesn't work. Just like a moment ago when we're dealing with these technical issues, it was built by someone else's brain with the assumption that it's my brain. And it's a huge disconnect. It's so big because it's like medicine. It's like, take this one pill for humanity and it'll fix you. It's like, I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. Humanity's complicated and brains are complicated and artists are complicated and engineers, and figuring out how your brain works, it took me years to figure it out. Because what would come roaring up, just like it did a minute ago, because it's such a trigger for me, is when I can't figure out someone else's brain and how they built something, makes me feel dumb. And then I get mad. I don't get mad at people. I get mad at me because I'm dumb.
Right.
And that still happens for me. The good news is it's way shorter and I know how to shortcut it.
That's, hey, that is the secret to all of it, because if you know how to relate to yourself in all situations, difficult ones, struggling ones, happy ones, that means you have a relationship with yourself. And you don't get to do that if you don't show up at the hardest moments. It's easy to, well, it's not that easy, but it's easy to sort of say, well, I'm dumb and I'm going to resign. And what happened then is that you don't want to fail, so you don't try. And if you don't try, you ask yourself, why am I still standing here where the rest of the world is ever changing? Because you're doing exactly the same behavior over time, which creates the same outcome, which makes sure you don't fail. Therefore, you don't try. And then but I always wanted to do things. I think that part of the things that we've learned and I was in the same boat as you are, stupid, lazy, what a cute little boy, but he wouldn't do much in his life. And thank God for my mom and my my family to say that's not who this little boy is at home. He is the most creative, he's the most out of the box, he's so unique, he's so different. So what if he can spell cat? He can design worlds and fashion and one of the things that I know it's so important in those early years is finding that maybe mentor.
Mentors are critical.
Like a teacher or somebody that can look at you and says, maybe you can spell like the rest of the kids, but I can see your gift. And you might not even know that exists, but because they see it in you when you look at you, you can kind of get some of that confidence from them, or at least says, if they believe and they're smart, they can spell and write. Maybe there is a hope for me. Did you have anybody earlier in your career or in your education that sort of lights up for you, that sort of did that type of mentorship or support?
Oh, I had so many, Gil. I mean, I could list them, Al Farrow, David Best, David Tice, Harrison Shepard would be some of the tops. And they were, Al Farrow's a sculptor. I worked with him. David Best was a sculptor. He's a big Burning Man guy. He builds the temples out there. And Harrison Shepard was a lawyer. And David Tice was a photographer who I ended up working for 6 years. And they were able to give me what I would call good information. There's lots of information out there. There's some of it's really bad information, which would have been my early information. Is the definition of a man is someone who smokes, drinks hard, has a lot of women, never cries. Like, that would be it. And I'm like, I am so not that, but I'm going to try to be that. And these mentors are like, whoa, 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 whoa. That talked about hard work, talked about sketching your ideas out, taking chances. One of his, I wanted to dance with Sonia Trescher at the dance when I was in high school. And I sat on the side of the auditorium willing Sonia to come over and ask me to dance. And she was across the room on the other side, on the girls' side of the gymnasium. And that never happened. And I went to Al and I'm like, well, that never happened. He goes, well, why didn't you just get up and ask her to dance? I said, well, I was too afraid. He said, well, wouldn't you rather know than not know? I was like, that's kind of a good point. The next dance, got up, asked Sonia to dance. We danced the whole day. Had the best time. But one thing I really would like to address is this idea of feeling dumb and the anger. Because I don't remember what the exact percentage of prison population is, but it's very high with dyslexics. And I think what happens is that the world is making fun of you as a dyslexic and calling you dumb and calling you these things, and the anger builds. And then at some point, there's a breaking point, and you punch a guy in the face or you do something, and then you're in front of the judge, and then now you're violent, and then you do something else because you're just so damn mad at the world. The world isn't giving you hugs and kisses and love. They're calling you stupid and dumb. And why can't you? And the rage builds. I mean, I was there. I was a very dangerous man in my 20s. I just was. I was a powder keg. And the good news is I got help, A friend of mine said he went to anger management 3 times. He said the first time he went, he just got so mad he had to leave.
That's funny.
Anyway, by the 3rd time, I didn't go to anger management. I just had to deal with some father issues, I think, and the shaming and all that, and get to a point where I could love myself. That was a big journey. And then once I fell in love with myself, the anger went away. It was kind of amazing.
Well, you were saying the other day, just a minute ago, and I feel so often is like when I'm put in a position where I feel like I'm not as competent, then I open that sort of shadow box of anger and be like, because I don't want to be perceived as incompetent. But the main thing is that I am the one that thinks that I'm stupid.
Yeah,
Because
you're building.
If I was stupid, then I wouldn't even know the difference, right? Like,
well, you wouldn't be in the room having that conversation, right?
That's right. So it's actually that anger is masking the sadness of just feeling like that old child that says, man, I've tried so hard and I'm still not as good as the other kids that are barely trying. And it can take a lifelong process to get to the place where you actually love that little boy or the little girl.
Yeah.
And you say, you know what?
Or the big person.
I don't care if he can spell. It doesn't matter to me. Now I'm in a situation I was like, I can't spell. You spell it, Or frankly, I have a lot to say. Take some notes because I'm going to go fast here, which is a very dyslexic mind, right? And I can't do it twice. Like if I tell you a tagline, write it down because it's not going to come twice. It's going to be different, right?
It goes through, right? It's like
you're streaming it, and then it just dents again. I'm like, oh, what was it, But I think that there is something about embracing your strength and your differences and getting to a place that you see yourself as a whole person, because we all have strengths and differences, and actually loving those differences maybe more than your strengths. Because the truth is, at least from my experience, what I perceive to be my weakness is why I'm so good at what I do today. I just didn't know it. My sensitivity, my compassion, my ability to listen with my whole body, my ability to remember things because I couldn't write them down. So I had to really be in the moment and almost record it in my mind so I can retrieve it. Some people call it photographic memory, but when you practice it, then you can be like, I know exactly what was going on. And it's always the truth because I was present in the moment. But that's because as a child, I was always trying to figure out how to mask my
To hide.
shortcoming. Yeah. You know, so I was like, I was just observing quietly in the shadows or whatever, right? But it's a lifelong pursuit of finding the things that maybe you don't feel so strongly about, or you don't, you're not as good at.
But it
You
led
still
you to
need to
doing
do.
these podcasts, right? I mean, you're like, who else has this? What other wisdom comes out of it? Let's talk about this in a positive way, or let's at least talk about it. Because it was so well. I mean, I was born in 1961. One of the things I love about 1961 is a number. If you turn it upside down, it's 1961.
That's cool.
It's like a, I don't know, it's a yin yang number. There's the other one
Uh-huh.
is 1111 or 000.
Right.
But I love that you're doing this, bringing it into the light. You know, what are the challenges? What are the triumphs? What are the victories? What are the, how does it work? Um, I think it's amazing, Gail. So thanks for including me. Feels like we're in this sort of world confessional booth.
We are. We are. You and I and the rest of the dyslexic community at large. And, it's the kind of thing that when my pursuit as far as getting language around this is because I just didn't know. And there was nobody ever talked about the dyslexia gift, dyslexia thinking, the idea that we have, so much pattern recognition, emotional, knowledge, we see the world in such a bright way, but we never really talk about it. We talk about what I can't do. I mean, what the actual, what other way of thinking that the main thing about it is what you cannot do. It's like I'm a disabled basketball player. I'm not good at basketball, but do we judge me for my lack of height and coordination? Like, no, I just don't play basketball, but I can do other things. But I don't know. I think that it's like finding a way to talk about the whole person and talk about what the dyslexia experience is. Allowed me to come out of my shadow. I think that that's what it was. I think that I was so afraid, like I didn't want them to discover me. I always I was so full of anxiety, and at some point I was like, well, enough with that. Now I meet everybody. I was like, oh, by the way, I'm dyslexic, and it's like, how is that relating to the conversation? I was like, I just want you to know that. That's not relating to anything.
I want
I
to
just
get
want
that
you
out
to
in
know.
front.
Yeah, just like what? So I want to go back to your early days of I know you were you describe yourself as self-taught. Where did you gain those?
I
Where did you
think
get the
that's not
tools? Yeah,
accurate.
it's not.
I think that's not accurate, Gil. And that's, I think, in my bio. And I think after this this podcast, I'll go and change it because we come into the world with two parents. There are all the teachers that helped or didn't help or that. Um, I think what I mean by that is what it should say is I barely got out of high school. I
Mm,
think is what it should say. And I had a lot of mentors, many, and I'm a hands-on learner. But I think what it really means is I didn't go to any formal like university. I didn't go to college. I didn't because I didn't like school. That's where the judgment is. That's where the grades are and the numbering and you sit way down here and everyone is up here and I just didn't like it. It was really hard and painful for me. And I went
mhm,
to an English prep school on Vancouver Island for 5 years. And I wanted to drop out of high school in the 10th grade, and my mother freaked out. I mean, she's like, I hope you like either moving or digging ditches, because that's what you'll end up doing. So she scared me perfectly, and God bless
mm,
my mother. And so I think self taught is not accurate. I think what it really means is I didn't go on from high school to learn. I learned
mhm,
at in practical applications with my mentors in the foundries, and with David Tice in the studio teaching me how an 8x10 camera works with swings and tilts, and how developing my darkroom skills and people skills and technical skills. And so, I went to the school of life is, I think, more accurate. I don't have a degree in anything.
Well, I love that you're seeing it that way, because learning, no matter of the subject, is just being open and being curious, and in many ways acknowledging you just don't know. And I found, as I start to embrace my dyslexia, that I would actually, when I work with others, my first thing is, I don't know. Teach me. Show me. How are you doing it? What are you thinking? And that to me is like, you don't need to go to university in order to sort of learn how to learn. You just need to be curious. And as dyslexics, because we do things never the same way twice, every process I do is a learning thing, and now I'm embracing it. Wait a second, we do this the same way last week. We're not doing it. We already did that. Like, why would you do it again? What's the point of that? You already experienced that. Now let's try something new. And by trying to find a new way of doing it, you're self-educating. You're looking at
and you also find out what's more
solutions.
efficient or what's more fun or whatever.
Sure.
What's the difference between it? Yeah.
Yeah.
My mother was very dyslexic, and I was fascinated when I would watch her write Christmas cards.
Painful.
She would have a pile of envelopes, and the stamps and the letters were there, and sometimes she would write the letter and put it off to the side, and maybe write another letter, then fold it and put it off to the side. Then write the next letter, fold it, put it in the envelope, put it aside. The next one, write a letter, fold it, put it in the envelope, put the stamp on it, put it aside, but don't address it. like, even I was like, well, why don't you just write all the letters and fold them up and put them in the envelope? She goes, oh, that's no fun.
Well, at least she embraced it. I mean, that's it.
Exactly.
In our world, I mean, you and I are in very similar worlds, slightly different mediums, but they always come and says, I want a brand, I want a logo. And I always remind them that the logo is the final step in the process. If we do the process correctly, the logo would remind you who you hope to be. Not is it a beautiful logo, because you can get a $9.99 logo, but does that remind you who you are? So the work you do around portrait identity it's not just an image of you. I'm trying to find the feeling, the inspiration of you through you, but it's less about just your portrait. And I just find that to be a win-win, because creativity for me has two major points to it. One is that it's about ever expanding, so make a lot of room for it. And the second thing is it's about playing collaboration. Otherwise, go do it on your own in the dark room. But if I'm doing it with others, I want to pass the ball to them. I want to know what they want and then what I want, and go back and forth. And I think that that's definitely, to your point, builds the trust. Obviously, if you don't deliver, then what's the point? But obviously, you always been delivering, so there you go. And people know that. You know that you're going to go the extra mile. Now, it goes full circles, because I'm still going to do it if you don't pay. I'm so obsessed about doing it right that I want to take the extra mile to really know that this is the way to capture what I'm doing in order to communicate truly what I'm trying to say, versus just accidental, pretty situation that are not preconceived in the same way. Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. I love your project, We the People, and that you did it, 2020 or something like that?
Oh yeah. Well, time for me is a record. I don't know what year it was. It was during COVID. I really ponder this idea of separateness. I think community is a real thing. I said earlier, it's not called the Wii phone, it's the iPhone. And we're doing a lot of this, and we should be doing a lot of that, looking each other in the eye. And so I approached Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco, And they're like, wow, you want to do portraits of the congregation? I'm like, during COVID? I'm like, what? We don't know. But they were like, but I had done other work with him. I knew Cecil Williams pretty well, who was the head minister there. He had passed on, but Marvin White, who was the new minister, said, yeah, let's do this. So they put out an email blast, and said, who's interested and willing to do this, unmasked, just this portrait. And I guess we got about 60 people. And then used this morphing technology to morph people into each other. And I negotiated with City Hall to project it on City Hall. You know, there are 60 feet portraits on City Hall. And it's called We the People because that's what democracy is built on here in America, you know, and putting it on a government building like City Hall, I think is the right message, you know. Behind those beautiful columned walls and the dome are people there making decisions on our behalf. And who are the people that are in there? Who are the people they're making these decisions about and for? And I thought it was a great how about it. And there was going to be Glides Memorial's gospel choir on the steps of City Hall for the morphing, and City Hall said no concerts. So we couldn't do that part of it. But it was up for a week. People would come by and drive by, and there was one gentleman who we interviewed because I did a little video about it. And he said, you know what I like about this project, We the People, is it nobilizes the unseen. The people that are unseen are being nobilized. And I was like, I just love that language.
What's some of your ways of making them, what's your process, what's your way of making them kind of come to life in a different way than our traditional selfies or just a more traditional portrait setup?
I want to tell a Richard Avedon story about this because I think it's so profound. Richard Avedon photographed the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. He abdicated from being the king because he was going to marry a divorcee, and they lived in New York. And Richard Avedon was hired to do their portrait for a major magazine, maybe Life magazine or something. And they were going to do it at their apartment. And Richard Avedon showed up about 40 minutes late to the appointment. He came in with his assistants, didn't apologize. He said, let's just get this going. And as he said, and I heard him tell this story, they put on their magazine faces and he took their pictures standing there. And he said at the end, he said, because he knew they were dog lovers, he said, let's do the last couple of frames with the puppies. And they said, oh, what a marvelous idea, marvelous idea. And they went and got their two dogs, and they were each holding one of the dogs in their arms. And Richard Avedon had a few frames left on the Hasselblad, the medium format camera. And he said, I didn't explain to you or apologize why I was 40 minutes late coming to this portrait session, which mattered to me. I don't like to be late. He said, but as I was leaving my apartment on the Upper West Side, my dog Fluffy ran out of my apartment and was hit by a taxi and killed. And they both went, and he took the picture. Richard Avedon did not have a puppy that ran out of that apartment and got killed by a taxi. He made it up. It was a lie. And he said, all emotion is real emotion.
Wow.
I don't subscribe to lying to portrait subjects to get them to react. But the way you get around that is you take the emphasis off the camera and you put it on looking them in the eye, asking them about themselves, and starting out with the basics, which is, how are you today? And I'd be like, really, how are you today? And I've had people say, you know, I'm pissed. I just had a fight with my wife, and I haven't had breakfast, and I really like a cup of coffee. And I'm like, well, let's just sit down for a minute, have a cup of coffee, and we'll ease into this. That right there, I think, is a humanizing thing, because I do believe the language that you do take a photograph. You take something from someone, their likeness, their smile, whatever it is, you are taking. And And I really try to make a point of giving them their portrait, a physical copy of it, because then I've taken it, then I've given it. And that to me has a nice balance to it. And then I do my homework. If I'm photographing, Ray Bradbury, the fiction writer, I do my homework. I've read Fahrenheit I've read his books. I go in there knowing, or, do your homework, because I don't want to talk about the weather. I want to say, when I photograph Ray Bradbury, who is a science fiction writer, who was terrified to fly. And so American Airlines was doing an article on him about his fear of flying. And so we talked about that. He's like, it had intimacy, it had authenticity, it had realness. And I think that comes through in the portrait.
That's really nice to, I think to your point, it's a simple thing. Is just like, how are you? You don't have to take a picture or design a brand for anybody to just stop and see somebody, really see them and say like, how you doing? Or I see that you're having you're carrying a heavy bag. Can I give you a hand? And it's only to cross the street. I was the other day, there was a neighbor down here and she was, carrying 2 bags, and I felt for her, and I wanted to give her a hand, and I said to her, can I give you a hand? And she's like, thank you so much, but I work out all the time. And I'm capable. And I was like, have a great day, man. That was amazing. We just had a real moment. She felt seen. I felt seen. She stood for her power and her, tenacity and everything. And now I know my neighbor a little better, and it's like, it's the kind of thing, as you're saying, it's just care and be open to it. And no matter what your talent or you think that you want to explore, it's only going to make it better. You know?
And we are here. Like you said, I see you. We're in this together. And she can say, I don't need help. I work out. But I think that we could change our communities quite rapidly if we just started really looking each other in the eye and say, good morning. Like, how are you? You don't have to drag somebody into a 45-minute conversation, but it's like, we are here.
Yeah. I wanted to jump to the mural you did in a school in San Diego with, I think it was over 200 portraits. Tell me, how did that project come about? What was the challenges of working with so many images?
No, it's one of my most fondest pieces I've made to date.
Is that right?
I got a telephone call, or it was an email about a public work project in a public-private Catholic school in San Diego called St. Rita. And it's at the 4 corners of death in San Diego. Like, it's in the worst possible neighborhood. I mean, there's gang murders there, prostitution, and yet there's this private public Catholic school that's there. And they wanted a piece for the new art center that was going in, that had been and a new playground, and like millions of dollars had gone into this school to create a much better learning experience. And I got this saying that, like, what would you do? And I think I wrote back, I said, I'm very interested. Could I have a few days to get back to you about this? I think it's important you respond quickly, but you can also set the parameters. I didn't say I didn't have any ideas. I just said, can I have some time to think about it? And the name of the project was this art center and creating this better experience from an asphalt playground that was on a hill where they leveled it and put in basketball courts and grass and a garden and an art center, and I thought about my schooling experience, and then this idea that I'd seen years ago, which is a lenticular. And a lenticular is the winking Jesus. When you go by it's 2 photographs, and it does something. And I played around with it a little bit, and then I'm like, you know what could be? It just came to me kind of in a flash a few days later. I'm like, you could take a picture of a child with their head down and take a picture, another picture, the same, where they're like this, or just that, and make a lenticular of that, where the kid is praying or in reverence, and then laughing or they're lifting their head. And so I had that, and I made one of me doing it, and then I sent it to them. I said, I'm thinking what it could be is photograph all the students and all the teachers doing this, so that when you walked by it, you would get this human experience 200 times.
Wow.
And then I was like, well, this school, this little tiny school of 200 students and teachers, is inside a city, San Diego, of X amount of people, which is inside a state, which is inside a nation. So the little rock on the mountain is the mountain, that Buddhist idea. Right. And then I'm like, I'm going to photograph them against red, white, and blue and do that and make that 200 thing into the American flag. Wow. So that when you walked by it, the kid's head go up and down and the flag waves. And brilliant. They were like, we're all in. They're like, you're our guy. And so, I spent 4 or 5 days photographing the kids and the teachers. And what was so great, all these kids, these are inner city kids, and like, hey, Mr. Photographer, Mr. Photographer. I was Mr. Photographer. It was, and it just, I didn't hire any assistants. I did it all. I did all the photography. It was printed up in Canada, the 200 lenticulars. They're 1 foot by 1 foot square, 20 long, 10 high. I installed them. I wouldn't do that again. I would get help. I just was like, oh, yeah. But when you did walk by it, it did happen. It did go wave. The flag waved, and then I got a call from them like, we want to move it from the art center onto the fence where more people see it. And I'm like, oh boy, I really don't want to do that.
Did you end up moving it?
I ended up moving it. I said this: I will take it down and get the adhesive off it, but you need someone else to install it. Fair. And I didn't charge for the deinstall, which could have been a mistake, but I didn't want to put a financial burden on the school, and but I didn't want to do the whole thing either. So I thought it was a good compromise.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing piece, and it's such a dyslexic thinking piece because you took these children, you took the collective, which is the school, you took the American flag, and you not only celebrate these individual kids, but you celebrate the community through it. And again, I think it goes to the heart of your work, which is so often around this shared humanity, and connection. And how do we bring that? It's easy to say, but how do we viscerally make you feel it? And I think both of those projects, both the San Diego project and We're the People, really kind of go to the heart of that same idea. I wanted to ask you this question a while back, and now that I have you cornered in your van, this is a perfect opportunity. When is the first time you cut your photograph? When you start doing the weaving, like when was the first time you're like, what?
Oh yeah,
I'm going to cut.
I just found out when I started doing that. It's coming up like 16 years now. I've been doing it. I only did it for one reason. Is they didn't make paper big enough for what I wanted to do. That was sort of the genesis of it. It only comes 60 inches wide, but if you cut it up, you can make it as big as you want, basically. Well, the roll is 100 feet long, so 60 inches tall, 100 feet long. But what was the very first experiment was I spent a lot of time in Cuba, in Havana, Cuba, more specifically. I led workshops there, photographic workshops and that. I'm going blank on who did it in the United States. It was a photographer, Robert Frank, photographed Sunset Boulevard from a car and made a book of the entire 5 or 7 miles or whatever it is as a book. And I just loved that idea. I was like, and so I hired a little 3-wheeler van and did the same on the Malecon. I photographed the seawall and then came back the other way and photographed all the buildings. Because the Malecon, which is the seawall in Havana, is called Havana's Couch. It's where everybody goes down to hang out and drink a bottle of wine and play music and blah, blah, blah. And I made a book. It's an accordion book. I could go get it. It's this big, and it's 10 by 10 inches, and it's that tall. And it's an accordion book. It's absolutely beautiful. But then I'm like, oh my God, that took me weeks and weeks and weeks to make. Like, I wanted it to be both sides, but I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So I did that, and then I was like, well, I could actually take the picture of looking down the Malecon and then picture, cut them up and weave them together. And you can compress perspective. And as Einstein might say, time, but let's not get into that. But it could. In the very first one, and somebody saw it and they said, can I buy that? And I'm like, yeah, but mine is just a little one. I said, if you're going to buy it, I got to make it a little bigger. I'm not selling 8 by 10 maquettes of ideas. I need it for I need to live with it. I can't part with it, to be honest. And they said, great, how much? And I'm like, I don't know, $4,000. And they're like, okay. I'm like, I should have said 8. So I wove it, and it was so beautiful. I wish I could hold it up. Anyway, and then I started talking about the fact that, and then I realized where the idea had come from. It had come from David Hockney's book on painting and vision and lenses. And Hockney is genius because he was a painter, widely collected in museums, and then one day he said, painting is dead. And he went into photography. And he would take a little cardboard throwaway camera and go click, 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 and then we do another one, click, click, send it out and get the little prints. And then he would make a collage of that. And I was like, that's a good idea. Because he said we don't see like a camera, click. We map it. We look at somebody's eyes or their teeth or their haircut or their shirt, and you build up an image of the image. And that has a lot to do with what the weaving is Hockney's idea of mapping. And then lastly, it's about entropy, that everything is falling apart. And so it enabled me to put a big piece of paper, mapping and entropy into one piece. So, and I think it's super effective, and I love it when they're done. I don't like doing them very much. They're death by 1,000 paper cuts, but they're not done by other people. I do them. Right. I try to get my daughters to do them. They're like, that's too much work, Dad. So.
When you look at those woven pieces now, do they feel connected to the way your brain arranges the information?
That's a great question. I think they represent some of the chaos that's inside there. I sometimes think that my brain works like a Rubik's Cube, that there's thousands of images on it that are constantly being turned into configurations to make sense of the world. So I think it's a tiny little representation of that, maybe. It's not a big representation, but I think it may be, Gil. You might be onto something.
It seems like your portrait projects at large are just getting bigger and bigger, and larger in scope. I know you're working on an installation right now that your goal is to take 1,000 portraits. Tell me about that project. How is that coming along? How many of those portraits you already taken?
First of all, that is correct. Second of all, who agreed to this?
I think you did.
So it is titled Eye to Eyes, a Sonoma Valley Museum portrait project with the Sonoma here, well, not here, but over there in Sonoma. 1,000 portraits of Sonoma County residents. The reason why it's 1,000 is because of the Japanese tradition of 1,000 cranes at a wedding for good luck. You know, they would hang them from trees and do that. And it's a real number. At the beginning of the project, maybe I could take, or at the end of this thing, I could walk you through the van and show you sort of the interior of it. But there's a whiteboard here in the van. And after we did our very first portrait, it's also an interning program with I mentor kids from the college that are in photography, so they learn that our projects, you can actually have a living and make a living, and these are the skill sets you need, from production to producing to shooting to releases to meetings with the museum. And I hope to mentor 10 kids. So we're at 2. I've got another, well, I'm at 3. I've got another gal coming on at the first of the year. And it's literally a mashup between Richard Avedon's American West portraiture and Jim Goldberg's portraiture called Rich and Poor. So Richard Avedon did all his portraits on white. He was in a vehicle and he would set up a white background and take a portrait of the person. Jim Goldberg did environmental portraits of people in their environment, in their bedroom or at the front of their house, and then he would print the photograph. This is back in the day when you had to go in a dark room and make a photograph, and then he would go back to these people with a pen and say, how do you feel about yourself in this portrait, and write right on the picture. When I first saw Jim Goldberg's work, I was like this. I don't think I blinked for 40 minutes. I was just like, what? What? And what they wrote was so intimate and so vulnerable and so, like, it made the portrait human, dimensional, vulnerable, authentic. Anyway, and it stayed with me. And I pitched this project to the Sonoma Valley Museum like 2 years ago, whatever. And I told them, I said, I had just seen, anyway, I pitched it to them, and the writing on the photographs is it. It's where the connectivity of it lies, because it's where you're like, there's one gal who she's like, I don't know what to write on this. I don't like the portrait. I said, write that. And so she's like, I don't like this portrait. And she just sort of opened up and she said, I'm more of this kind of a person. And it's so beautiful. It's so honest. And then I caught a husband. I was looking out the window of the van and I saw that the husband was having his wife write on his portrait. And I said, that's cheating. You can't do that. Why are you having your wife write on your portrait? He goes, oh, my handwriting is so bad. I said, well, you need to write an arrow and say, my wife wrote this because my handwriting is bad, and then I'll get to see your handwriting, and it's the truth. And I'm like, so to answer your question, we have done 406 portraits out of 1,000. And at first I thought we would be just driving around with the mentorees and the interns and hey, you're a great looking person, let's do your portrait. And one of, I don't know if it was Richie or Adriel, said, 3 dudes in a black van, what could go wrong? So the most important commodity in portraiture is trust. So I reached out to the people I know in Sonoma and say, hey, doing this project, that started there. And then they told their friends, and it was like that shampoo commercial. And they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. And so, I've gotten into the ashram here in Sonoma. I photographed the chief of police, police officers, firemen. Not me, we. Because a lot of times the interns are doing the photography. So I've showed them kind of how I do it and some of the tricks, which is, close your eyes, take a deep breath. How you doing? Spin around, just spin around in a circle. Put your arms, and it's so interesting because I'll be inside the van eavesdropping on them doing it, and I hear them running it, and the work is good. It's not going to be 1,000 portraits framed in the museum. I've also committed that no one is getting edited out of the exhibition. Everyone who's participated in it is going to be in it. It's probably going to be another projection piece. Okay. And we're probably going to turn this mobile van into the projection van so we can drive around and just show up and project. But the thing that's most exciting to me is in the museum, I think what I want, I haven't discussed this, so this is the first time I'm actually saying this out loud in public. I want to build a photo booth that sits in the middle of the museum where you go in the booth and you take your own portrait and you write your thing and it goes up immediately in the museum. So if it didn't get taken the original 1,000, the exhibition is getting bigger and not smaller. So people can participate in it. It's sort of like a confessional photo booth.
I love that.
So
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been busy, and the back end of it is a lot of, connecting and getting the trust and, farmers markets. And I got into the autism clip. There's a place up in Sonoma where they have autist peoples, and was welcomed in there and had an amazing couple days with them. And I mean, being human, my God, it's swathy.
What would you say is your hyperability?
I think my hyperability is to be with any human being on this planet and have some sort of connection. Whether I speak their language, I don't speak their language, young, old, any race. And I didn't know that was my superpower. You know who told me that was my superpower? Dr. Jordan Schlane. He's the one. He's like, because we asked each other these questions and sort of philosophical questions, and I think it's true. I think it's part of what makes my portraiture function. I guess is I'm not intimidated by the wealthy or the famous or that. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is our usness. That's what matters. And I've also been humbled. I've made lots and lots of money and been a jerk and fallen down, and I've been famous. I was famous for a very brief period in 1991 in the former Soviet Union with a show I took over there called Positive Negatives. And I was on TV and radio. I couldn't go out on the street. People were like, Jocka, Jocka, touching. And I'm like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to be famous. Wow, that was, I got dragged up on stage with a 25-piece orchestra to play a blues song. I played blues harmonica, and I was like, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be paraded around and forced to do things to be famous. It was like, yeah. But I think that the other thing that the superpower for me of dyslexia was the pain that it caused that dragged me to therapy to find out what it was to fall in love with myself. Like, that's a beautiful thing. Like, that's a love story.
Well, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your honesty, your transparency, your commitment to the community and to expressing, our humanity and a connection. And I just really, really appreciate you. I enjoyed talking with you very, very much. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. And for all of you out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe us, and share. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, or everywhere you get your podcasts. And also follow us on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Gil. You're amazing.
If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe to this series wherever you get your podcasts. Visit dyslexicdesignthinking.com to learn more about our latest initiatives, including Dear Dyslexia, the Postcard Project, or to book Gil to speak at your next event or conference. Stay connected on Instagram at Dyslexic Design Thinking. or drop us a line at dyslexic@gershoni.com to receive our monthly newsletter and learn more about our upcoming programming. Dyslexic Design Thinking is produced by Gershoni Creative. Until next time, be well.